Is it just me, or is Elphaba and Glinda's relationship in Wicked kind of toxic? So I have been analyzing Elphaba's survival patterns and Glinda's survival patterns in Wicked and Wicked for Good. Go watch those videos. And it's interesting because when I look at their relationship together, I'm just like, oh, this is how a lot of toxic relationships come to be. When you enter into any relationship in mostly your survival pattern, in your survival identity, it ends up being somewhat codependent, kind of toxic, and very high highs, low lows, kind of up and down crazy. You know what I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure we've all had some of these. And they're there to sort of balance you out, but also they also show you what you are lacking. They're a mirror for you. I basically put Elphaba in the empath survival pattern category. I put Glinda in narcissist light. I think that she had narcissistic tendencies. I don't think she's a full narcissist, especially not by the end of Wicked for Good. But she does tend to lean on her ego and be more image-based. I think naturally you tend to pick between one or the other. You're either trying to be more in your ego, more protective, trying to protect your public image, or you end up caring more about other people's feelings, like letting go of your own boundaries, letting go of your own ego, and maybe caring about everything else outside of you. So you end up being more empathic. When we have a survival pattern, we do become a little bit more masterful, of course, in that extreme and living in the extreme of that survival pattern. We may deep dive into, our morality and being really empathic and knowing how to help people. We may become master helpers, or we may become so good at working a room, at having a good public image, at knowing how to manipulate people and how to take advantage of situations for our own gain. We learn good skills from being in either or survival pattern, but we also lose the opposite skills. Elphaba could not rely on her identity, on her ego, on her public image, because by default, she was green. It was different. No one liked it. And she was already just picked on, bullied, and also she had magic powers. And so everything surface level about her scared people, made people feel like she was unsafe. And so she could not survive with, based on just her appearance and how she was in her public image. So she had to lean on her values, making sure her as a person inside was high morals, was really empathic to other people. And so she grew up already knowing what it was like to not feel safe in her public image. And then with Glinda, she grew up with her parents literally telling her, it doesn't matter that you don't have magic. It doesn't matter that you don't have these abilities. As long as you're likable, as long as people like you, you will thrive. Actually, what they were telling her was, just lean on being liked in order to survive. So that is Glinda's survival pattern. So it's really interesting because the both of them start Wicked with just leaning on one side, like one part of themselves, one part of being human. And Glinda's was leaning on the ego. Elphaba's was leaning on being empathic. We can grow up being really skilled and masters of both of those things. And it's important to, and I think it's okay to have your forte. And I don't think that we'll ever get rid of having, what we're best at. But I think when we step into the real world, just living out our survival pattern, it's not enough. I think that you are going to show up like you are just surviving. I feel like it is going to seem like you are not complete. You're not balanced. If you're still living out your survival pattern, you're not going to feel grounded or complete or feel like you can ultimately thrive. We see that with Elphaba, she's still going to be picked on and easily scapegoated and taken over and manipulated. And with Glinda, she is still going to lack actually close, genuine relationships that she's trying to find, even if maybe on a huge public image scale, everyone loves her. when she wants to get married, the guy she wants to get married to, like, actually doesn't feel like she's empathic or cares about him enough. So that's why he leaves her on their wedding day. And her friend, the only friend that mattered, quote unquote, to her, like, she unfortunately ended up participating in the campaign that scapegoated her, that made her evil to the point where she needed to fake her death and leave the city. So with Glinda, she's like, I want these close relationships. This is the only friend that mattered. I want to get married. Why don't these people like me? I don't know, but everyone else loves me. She wasn't going to get what she ultimately wanted inside because she's only leaning on public image and not at all at her inner morality and caring about people and empathy. So we become really drawn to and magnetically like attracted to people who probably have our opposite survival pattern. And if it's not our opposite, they're just people who mirror our survival pattern in general. And I think with Elphaba and Glinda, when they first meet each other, they're kind of like, I hate you. Oh my God. I don't agree with your survival pattern. I don't agree with your belief system. Like, Glinda's like, I need to fix the problem of you being green and it will help you. And then Elphaba's like, oh my God, she is way too image-based. Like, this, everything is pink and I hate it. And she's blonde and whatever they say in Loathing. Eventually, like, they learn to learn from each other. But it gets really bumpy because when you're with your opposite, kind of like when you date someone who is your opposite, it ends up being really rocky, kind of up and down, very unfortunately codependent, because again, you're not feeling whole in yourself. You're just playing out your survival pattern. So toxic things end up happening because you both have different belief systems as to like what needs to happen, how to make yourself feel better. So we see the first thing that is really toxic that happens is Glinda like tries to bully Elphaba publicly, and she does. And then she takes it back and then she's like, oh my God, like she actually helped me. Oh no. And then after that, she's like, okay, well, I'm going to make this better. I'm going to try to make her popular. I'm going to try to give her a makeover. And so Glinda is just basically trying to assert whatever she thinks is best onto Elphaba without asking her, without really like considering what is best for her. She's just like, well, I think you just need to learn how to be popular. And then what Elphaba really wants is to like be with the wizard, like learn her magic and everything. But then when Elphaba realizes that the Wizard of Oz is a phony and basically the narcissist in the story, Glinda's like, well, that doesn't really matter. You still get what you want, right? And she completely like discards Elphaba's sense of morality and what is important to Elphaba. And that's so interesting because it's just like that mirrors a lot of toxic relationships and codependent relationships based on survival, right? You have two different people trying to decide what to eat and that's causing an argument, and everything else is causing an argument. Like whatever opposite opinions you have, they're not meshing well together. They're either like someone has to give in and and doesn't feel like they're being heard, or you're just battling constantly about everything because you do disagree on how to survive with everything. And sometimes it's magnetic because that person does teach you the thing that you want, you know, like, well, Glinda is going to help me with my public image, and that's what I needed. Well, Elphaba is giving me this idea of morals and morality and where we could go beyond the toxic environment of Oz, and maybe I should go with her at the end of Defying Gravity. And I think that it gets really up and down, it gets really toxic, it gets very confusing, and you could choose to totally depend on the other person to help you get what you want, and to complete you, or you can choose to, you know, dim yourself down and choose to live however they want. If you're like me and you identify as empathic, you might feel a little bit dumb when you keep dating people and you're like, oh my God, they are just like the last person except for a little bit less toxic. And you might be like, why do I keep attracting this pattern? Like, I thought I empowered myself after the last breakup. Oh no, here's another one. Here's the thing. I don't think that, first of all, you need to be perfectly healed in order to deserve love or in order to wait to date again. It is your choice. But you get to decide how you want to grow. Sometimes it does take still another person to trigger you into more heightened growth. And I know that that's sucky, and I know that you may have friends or people around you who are just like, stop dating, stop doing this, like stop going into those karmic patterns, like stop doing whatever. That's true. Like you can decide not to. But if you do, you are probably going to end up with the same sort of lesson at the end where you're like, I have to empower myself, but at least this relationship pushed me into doing that more. People will still help you grow. Toxic situations will help you grow. They just feel shitty. Sometimes you can have the acknowledgement that you can go and grow by yourself and you don't need anybody else. And I think it may take us a while to get there. We may still have to karmically go through these relationships to ignite us, to push us into growth. And I think either way, you may have stayed in your survival pattern if you did not have a reason to get out of it. And I think people and outside situations, things outside of you, will always trigger what you need to see that you haven't grown yet in yourself. Like people, anything that happens outside of you, whatever you're doing, it will show you what you still need to learn. So even if it's not a romantic relationship, you might still see these patterns happen when you're choosing friends, when you're choosing like a workplace, or however you want, whatever you want to do. If you're trying to build a business, like if you're trying to get over a hump, if you're trying to grow into a different person at all, you are going to be faced with whatever your block is. You are going to be faced with what you are, with your wounds, basically. With Elphaba and Glinda's dynamic, I think that the two of them had a little bit of, I think that they got into a really toxic zone in Wicked for Good because, like, Glinda just full on, like, supports the narcissist campaign against her scapegoated friend, Elphaba. So Glinda just participates. She doesn't really try to reach out to Elphaba. She doesn't really think too much about how things might be affecting her mentally. And she doesn't realize how much participating in this campaign and not saying anything is also making Elphaba just like, I think that would make her mentally just off. Like it created isolation for Elphaba, and Glinda doesn't realize it. She doesn't realize at all how much whatever she's doing to make her public image happy is affecting her friend. And then I guess you could say on Elphaba's side, she doesn't think probably that, well, no, on Elphaba's side, I think that you see when they meet each other again in Wicked for Good that Elphaba is a little bit more empathic and understands what Glinda wants. And she's just like, well, I don't want to hug you because I'm going to ruin your wedding dress. You're going to do whatever. You're going to take the guy that I want. You're going to be labeled good even though I'm evil. Elphaba just like doesn't even care that Glinda is getting all this shit while she's getting the short end of the stick and actually being ostracized and shit. Like Elphaba is really like, she does not basically at all fault Glinda or get mad at Glinda at all, which is kind of crazy. And like, but it's still unhealthy for Elphaba. And in the end, like Glinda realizes like, oh my God, they just killed Elphaba's sister. Like, oh my God, they're going to attack Fiora. Oh my God, they're finally going to try to kill Elphaba now throughout like Wicked for Good. And it's like, yeah, girl, no shit. Like this was dangerous. And so Glinda was just kind of like, I'm obviously not a big Glinda fan, but she allowed abuse and unhealthy things to happen to the person who was the only friend that mattered to her closest ally or friend or whatever. And it's just unfortunately really mirroring what can happen in real relationships like this, where like one person might take most of the glory. One person might benefit the most, and the other person, like, the empath, will end up giving up their identity, their ego, whatever, to help build up the more ego-driven person. And you see that play out in Wicked for Good until Elphaba finally, crashes out, finally goes into her villain era, which is healthy because she's just acknowledging the boundaries that she wished she had before, and that she doesn't want to just let go of her boundaries and not be taken care of. So that's great. But yeah, Elphaba goes into her whole villain mode. She's suddenly I have boundaries. I'm going to take them out on Dorothy and whatever. And Glinda's finally well, don't capture the little girl, let her go. And okay, anyway, I think that Elphaba at the end of the movie finally decides, I no longer want this survival pattern. I no longer want to have a lack of boundaries and to be stepped all over and to have my name scorned and to have everyone around me get hurt. I was trying to help these people so much to the point where I ended up just being burned and being blamed instead of being thanked and appreciated. And that's real. That's very real to what can happen when you are the person, the empathic person who's always helping high ego people, and you end up getting the short end of the stick and getting kind of scapegoated or blamed for everything as if you were a problem. And I think there's a moment that is really healthy when you snap and you're I'm no longer going to be the good girl. I'm no longer going to be a people pleaser. I don't want to fawn to these people because it is doing nothing for me and it's just building up them. And so I love when people can finally get into their villain era because you need to and you deserve it. But I think that when Elphaba finally reaches that point, and when an empath finally reaches that point, you are basically deciding, I don't want to live this pattern anymore. I don't want to live out this pattern in this relationship, in this environment, in my life anymore. And so you finally decide to kill it. And I think that when you are in relationships with people, especially if you're the empath to a higher ego person, I think you might feel the brunt of it more. And if you don't, the high ego person will give you a reason to want to leave anyway, because they are too selfish, they are too whatever. And you're going to get sick of it. It's going to get really unhealthy. Either way, both of your survival patterns, if you don't want to grow together, if you're not realizing that you can help each other grow more, then they will continue to butt heads until both of you realize, I am just surviving even in this relationship. So in the end, relationships like this, they may help you balance out just because they hold a mirror to the wounds that you still need to heal. And they hold a mirror to how much you're living in survival and you're not living in your full thriving, identity. And I think that when you have these types of relationships, they will accelerate your growth and you can stay in them. It's hard to be completely healed in general in your life. And that shouldn't hold you back from love. And I think that there can be a less intense, less toxic and abusive version of both of you living out mostly in survival patterns and triggering your wounds. And I think it's if both people are willing to grow at the same time, if they're both willing to be I want to be beyond my survival pattern. I do want to learn from you. And I think learning together will balance this out and make us healthier. Then you can work on it and you can continue. But I think that for a lot of people, especially when they're in the most intensely toxic and abusive version of these relationships, it's not healthy for them and they completely forget their dreams or they're completely just in their full toxic mode and they don't get to grow. And so it's better to break off from that type of relationship so that you can work on yourself. And so you don't have to have an opposing force. You don't have to have a codependent, toxic, whatever. So you're just focused on you. And that's why a lot of people post their most toxic relationships are suddenly I lost a lot of weight. I got healthier. Like, I gained self-esteem. Like, I realized my values. I realized what my boundaries are. Like, I pursued my dreams or did whatever the fuck I actually wanted. And like, a lot of the times that happens because sometimes you need to be so triggered to realize what it is you really want. And you don't have to be, but like sometimes it ends up that way. But either way, these relationships tend to balance us out. And they're not necessarily horrible. And I think that if you find that you keep finding these toxic patterns, you may look at yourself and go, am I a toxic person? Am I unhealthy for continuing to find these things? Like, why does this keep happening to me? Like, do I have to be perfect? No. But you can choose to decide every day, like, I don't want to live the survival pattern. Like, I want to live the thriving version of me. And it's crazy because, yeah, I think that Elphaba figures out that she wants to leave the survival pattern faster than Glinda. And the thing is when Elphaba does that, when she ultimately kills her survival pattern and her ego and she leaves Glinda, that triggers Glinda to be like, okay, yeah, I need to be actually good. I need to learn genuinely authentic, like, goodness. And I need to do better. And I feel like she wouldn't have catapulted into what she really wanted. You know, she wouldn't have grown into a more morally good person and less image-based person without Elphaba killing her survival pattern. Glinda might not have catapulted as fast into needing to be more good. In this situation, I really love it. And I think it's kind of crazy because this is just kind of like, I didn't think that I'd find so many themes within this movie, but it's a good movie. Yeah. And like musical and story and whatever other mediums it is. But like, I think that it's really great that in this story, the two of them ultimately decide not to continue the relationship and they have to part ways in order to become their full thriving selves. In order to be their full thriving identities, in order to not live in just a half sense of self and in like a survival personality. Like, they had to part ways to be their full selves and kind of faster than what they would have been if they were just teaching each other, depending on each other, like in arguments, like up and down all the time. Again, you can choose, and it's not always wrong to choose the person you love, even if you get through ups and downs, you don't get to your own shit like faster. It's gonna be hard to grow into your full self if you keep having reasons to dip back into your survival pattern. And those reasons are often relationships or environments, right? You can find people who are still working on themselves, but willing to heal and work with you. And ideally, that's what most people around you are like, because I don't think any of us are super like fully healed. I think that a lot of us, though, can enter into relationships with people who are conscious, who are aware, who are wanting to put in the work, or, you know, who want to work with that, as opposed to just falling into just a fully toxic survival pattern. Like, I think the thing to watch is it's not going to be healthy when you're in a relationship with a person who is completely not working on themselves, you know, who is completely acting out their toxic pattern. And you're like, well, my influence should help them, right? It could, but honestly, look at how much that person is not self-aware. And if you notice that maybe another person has similar tendencies, but they're more self-aware, they just don't get it, but they want to work on it, then they can be a person that you can take a chance on. But it's up to you to figure out what your actual boundaries are. Like, how much, either way, figure out, you know, what you really want, how much time you really want to spend on yourself, and make that the priority over somebody else. Because that's going to influence you and it might take you away from what you need. But yeah, anyway, so Wicked is surprisingly like such a good example of what I've been kind of talking about lately. And like, I just think that this story is really great because it is in some ways really realistic. And it is generally about how these two survival patterns respond to a toxic environment, and how they ultimately needed to learn from each other, but could not stay with each other in order to be more balanced out and to be healthier. So I think that's cool, you know, like that's really cool. Okay, but anyway, so I had other videos where I did break down Glinda and Elphaba's arcs. So watch them here. And for my next videos, I am just gonna I want to start reviewing more movies and different concepts of personal development or even like psychology in different movies. My next one, I would love to review Sinners and kind of have more of a like cultural generational healing perspective of it. And then and then my other content, I'm just gonna talk a little bit more about what I've learned in terms of like the narcissist empath spectrum, and then other stuff that I've been doing in my personal development journey. So yeah, let me know if you agree, disagree in the comments below. But until next time, peace and love. Bye-bye. I don't know. I used to have more personality. Then I got older. I got wiser. I worked more. And now I was already autistic, but now I'm a little bit more monotoned. And I'm having a little bit less fun, but making myself more serious. So this is what I'm trying to like stop myself from doing. Okay. Okay.